Okay, so here's a snapshot of the synoptic problem. The synoptic problem is basically how come the Gospels have similar stories about Jesus? Some of the bits are the same, some of the bits are different, some are really similar but with quite a different angle on them. How can that be? Well, let's consider how the Gospels first came into being. Firstly, of course, Jesus preached, taught, died, rose, ascended into heaven, which left the apostles with the memories of the stories, and all those people that Jesus had come in contact with actual memories, actual examples. They remember the Beatitudes, remember when Jesus was there, a couple of months ago, and he talked about the blessed are the poor. Remember when he said that? And it was a bright day and everything, right? So it was very real and tangible for them. Now, from that, the apostles picked up the message as time went on. Paul picked up the message and spread it. They travelled all around the Mediterranean and further as far as Rome. They told as many people as would listen, and lots of people came to believe in it and want to hear more. And then after a while, people started to say, well, we should write these stories down. One of the catalysts, one of the reasons why that might be, is that people were saying, well, we thought Jesus was coming back much sooner than he is. The generation of apostles is starting to die out. We need to write these stories down so that they're not lost. And one of the first to do that was Mark. It's believed that he wrote in 69 CE. CE is the same as AD, it stands for Common Era. Mark wrote around 69. We think so because he doesn't seem to have known that the temple was destroyed. So the Jewish temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and Mark would definitely have referred to it as the other gospel writers did in some way, and he doesn't seem to have done so. So that's one piece of evidence. There are others that seem to indicate that he wrote about 69 CE, which of course is still a considerable time after, around about 30 CE, when Jesus was crucified and then rose again. The other two gospel writers to write next that are considered synoptics are Matthew and Luke, and they wrote round about the same time. Most estimates seem to say approximately 85 CE. Now, it's very clear that Matthew and Luke both used Mark, or were at least familiar with Mark's work, and much of Mark's gospel is included in Matthew and Luke. And if you look at the paragraphs in your Bible that are headed up with various headings and little summary titles, you will usually find that there are references in the other synoptic gospels, sometimes John, but fairly rarely, that indicate where you can see similar stories. If you want to look a few of those up, you'll be able to compare and see where I'm coming from with this. John, as I mentioned, not a synoptic. Basically, you couldn't line up John's gospel with the other three gospels, and see a whole lot of obvious parallels. John, by this stage, 90 CE, he wrote his, had developed a very different theology from that of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. Now, there's another problem. That is, Matthew and Luke seem to have a whole lot of information in it that doesn't come from Mark, but that is in common with them. Matthew and Luke both refer to a number of events and sayings and preachings that Mark doesn't. Now, because we know that Matthew and Luke never got together to discuss it, scholars would say that this indicates that there is another source. They name it Q. Most often it's just referred to as Q or quelle, which means a quarry of information or sayings that Matthew and Luke both had access to, but has probably been lost over time. Could be worth a lot of money if anyone ever found it, but it's likely to have been destroyed, just as the papyrus or vellum that it was written on may well have just simply dissolved. Or perhaps this was a community of people that Matthew and Luke had access to that have long since disappeared. So they share a lot in common. Have a look. If you can find a reference that is in both Matthew and Luke, but not Mark, then we can pretty much guess that it is Q. You can also find a lot of material in both Matthew and Luke that is simply their own. It comes from their own sources, their own experiences perhaps, and is not found in either Mark or possibly in Q. And that, my friends, is considered the answer, or at least a solution, to the synoptic problem.